And welcome in everybody to another episode of the High Low Sports Podcast. Once again, on this Wednesday evening, we appreciate y'all for joining us, or if you're checking us out on one of your favorite places to watch podcasts later on. It is DJ joined as always by my co-host Kelcey. And Kelcey, we are halfway there, but not quite living on a prayer. We are very, very close as we get closer to the NFL season, about 2 weeks away, which means our NFL preseason predictions. We're 50% down, 50% more to go, and we're going out west today. We're gonna find the best of the West. We're going to Tupac territory, Snoop Dogg territory, everything out there, and predicting who's gonna come. Where the two teams that were in the Super Bowl came out of. We're gonna see if they can repeat at least as division champions this week.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. We talked about the South already, which if you guys missed that, obviously maybe I had a little stronger opinions on the South than most people. We had the North, which again, maybe I was too strong of opinion. And I think we're going to repeat that trend yet again. And let me just go ahead and say before we dive into this, I made my picks completely blind to their actual records. So this is all when I saw the final records, I just said, you know what? That's how I picked them. We're going to ride with this. So we'll see how this goes.
It's funny how when you cover up and look at the end like we did, it's just like, oh, that's what I think is gonna happen with like no predisposition, like, oh, that's too many wins, gotta start giving them some losses here. It's like, oh, all right, this is what I actually think. But it's definitely gonna have some fun here. I think this week we're gonna go and start off in the NFC because I think the NFC could be a little bit interesting this week. We'll start with the NFC West. I will go ahead and get us going. I'll start from the bottom to the top as per usual. At the bottom, I do have it. Every year there's a team that goes to the playoffs, and then the next year they don't end up making it. It's not gonna be, I'm not picking the 49ers here, so the Bay Area could put away their pitchforks. I do think that is gonna be the Rams that are gonna miss the playoffs this year, and I have them going 7-10. So nonetheless, I still think that's a very good team. I'm worried about Kyron Williams being banged up. I'm worried about Puka Nakua being banged up. I'm worried about Matthew Stafford being banged up. Last year Cooper Kupp was hurt, and that was a big deal. This year he's the only one who's not hurt, it feels like. You lose Aaron Donald, that's arguably a top 3 defensive player ever, depending on who you talk to. Either way, future Hall of Famer, no matter what way you slice it. They got a lot of young guys. And on top of it, the Rams have a history in the McVay of really good one year. The next year, there's a fall off. They won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Then we're picking top 5 the next year, or top 6, whatever it was. Technically, the Lions were picking for them. But you get the point. When they went to the Super Bowl, Jared Goff, they got to the Super Bowl and lost the worst offensive Super Bowl ever. Next year, missed the playoffs to the point where they ended up getting rid of Jared Goff a year later. So, following that trend, plus the injuries, plus we'll talk a little bit about some of the other teams. I want to put the Rams at 7-10. A good, respectable year, like put them in the NFC South. They might be the champions, honestly. But I think that tough division, the injuries a little worry me, and just following the trends. But it's more or less, I like some of these other teams just a little bit more. As much as I love what Kyron Williams did for me in fantasy last year, I don't know if he'll be able to repeat that, especially with the injury, especially with just the players they've lost as well. So I'm going to go at 7-10 for the Rams.
Yeah, I mean, definitely don't hate this one. I think it's worth mentioning all the players they did lose. Obviously, Aaron Donald, the big one you mentioned. But, there just happens to be a running back that would be really nice with this team right now that's no longer there. That just so happened to find himself in Houston, of all places, in Cam Akers, who you got to imagine right about now, the Rams and McVay might hope they still had him. But obviously, Kyron, we'll see what he does. If he even gets really touches, even when he's healthy. I mean, there's a lot of questions there for that as well. Potentially, Kyron Williams might not be the long-term back in this LA. So a couple questions that are worth mentioning there with the Rams. But yeah, I'm interested to see what they do. As you said, there's ups and downs with McVay. This feels like one that's going to be kind of middle of the road for them, and not necessarily great, not necessarily bad as well. But yeah, I get your 7-10.
They do have Blake Corum at running back, so I do like that a lot. And I think that could end up poaching touches, which is why here's the fantasy advice for the episode that even though it's not a fantasy show today, don't necessarily take Kyron Williams in the first round. I'm a little, not just because of the injury, but Blake Corum has a nose for the end zone. He is going to poach some of those touchdowns, I feel like. Like, I could be wrong. I like Kyron Williams a lot, but not first round pick a lot. Maybe not even second round pick, but enough fantasy talk. There's plenty of other times for that. I'll go and get us rolling so we don't take forever. We'll go to the third pick in the NFC West. In the third spot, I have the Arizona Cardinals with arguably one of the biggest improvements in the NFL, going to 9-8. When Kyler Murray was healthy last year for that stretch, they were 4-2, I believe it was, during that 6-game stretch. He was really efficient. People kind of forget how good Kyler Murray is, because even though it feels like he's been in the league a while, he's really only 26 years old, I believe, 27. And he was injured the last time we saw him. And that year was the year that everything came crashing down for the Cardinals. Basically, the entire thing imploded. Before that, they were a regular contender, playoff, middle of the pack team around 9-8 to 11-5 because of 16 games at the time. I think Jonathan Gannon, as much as Eagles fans have dismay for him, I think he's a decent enough head coach. I do think he knows. Look how much better they were defensively when he was there compared to when he was gone. So he's clearly knows a little bit, a little bit something. I think they had an incredible draft. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. off the top. Enough said. I think Trey McBride. Some people love him. Other people are like, "What the heck?" I think he's a really good tight end, and he was really good last year. You take him top 5 in fantasy. Sorry, I lied. More fantasy talk. That's another debate. But I do think there's a lot. There's a lot to like there. I think Zay Jones is a very good number 2 receiver they brought in. Offensive line, they added some pieces. James Conner, Trey Benson, I think they got the backs. Defensively, as I mentioned, they added some players too. Not saying they're going to make a run, but they're going to kick somebody out of the playoffs. I don't know who it is. They're going to ruin somebody's playoff hopes later in the season. And Kyler Murray he's just really good. We all forget how good he can really be. So give me the Cardinals at 9-8 and arguably the most improved team in the NFL.
Yeah, I don't hate this at all. It's not my ideal choice here, but I do think you're right with Kyler Murray's conversations, and it's one of those things you got to keep in mind. He was kind of doing things with a one receiver show for a long time, and now obviously it's still not great in Arizona, but adding having Trey McBride step up like he did at the end of last year, which everybody forgets, the end of last year he was on a great roll for tight ends, which is why he's being drafted, as you mentioned, very high in fantasy leagues. I believe you had him ranked the top 5 in the tight end ranking.
Third best tight end I would take because that target share is going to be real high, as we mentioned. It's him and MHJ with a little sprinkle of Zay Jones. So does that necessarily win many winning games? That's why I have them at 9-8. We won't get hasty there.
Yeah,
fantasy football is quality.
I do think that this is a team that can sneak up on somebody. You have them at 9-8. We'll talk about my pick of them a little bit later, but I will say it's not far off from where your 9-8 is. But yeah, I think this team is a team that could be sneaky. Not sneaky playoff victories type of sneaky, but I do think this is a team that's sneaky to the point of being a frustrating opponent for anybody trying to make that 5, 6, 7 seed in the NFC.
I love a lot of the draft picks they made just throughout the draft. I like what they did in free agency. I think they're a lot like last year's Texans. The problem is the 2 teams I have ahead of them in this division. The Texans didn't have to deal with that. They had Gardner Minshew and a broken Trevor Lawrence to deal with it out in the stretch. Where unfortunately the Cardinals have the defending NFC champions and the number 2 team I have in the NFC West. That is the Seattle Seahawks. I have bouncing back, and I'd have them going 10-7. Offensively, I like Ben Grubb as the new offense coordinator. Shane Waldron is a good OC. I think he's going to do good in Chicago, but I really do like what Ben Grubb's going to bring here with these position groups. Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think, is poised to break out in this offense. I think we saw a lot of it with Jalen Polk and those guys at UW. DK Metcalf, I think, finally has his first season of 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. He's done one or the other every year of his career. He just hasn't done both in the same season, which is not a knock on him. That's not insulting. I'm saying that's how good I think he's going to be. Tyler Lockett's still going to Tyler Lockett. He's still a best ball baller. Go check out our fantasy football rankings from a few weeks ago. I explained more about that. This year, I think they're just going to be healthier. Last year, their offensive line was ravaged by injuries. It was a rotating, revolving door. Geno Smith, I don't know if he'll be didn't write back Geno, but I think he'll be a little bit better and a little healthier, especially. Defensively is where they're going to be menacing. The secondary, outside of rookie Devin Witherspoon, kind of took a step back last year. Like Tariq Woolen wasn't quite as terrifying. I think that's going to change this year, especially with Mike McDonald, the head coach, the former defensive coordinator of the Ravens. Innovative as it comes, his defensive schemes, I'm not going to go deep into them because, frankly, it's a mess to try and explain sometimes. I need the full conspiracy theory board behind me to go through all of it. But basically, he makes an incredibly hard defense really easy, which makes it very, very easy for them to rotate and switch their defenses quickly. What we saw Kyle Hamilton do last year, I imagine Devin Witherspoon is going to do a lot of the same. As far as a defensive back blitzing, dropping a coverage, run defense, a very multifaceted secondary player who's, for lack of better terms, has that dog in him. I think pass rush, they actually got a rush too. I think Byron Murphy is going to revitalize the pass rush. So, you know what? And I think running game, Kenneth Walker, I think they're going to actually feed him the ball a little bit more consistently this year. And Zach Charbonnet is a good spell back. And they'll throw the ball to the tight end. So give me the Seahawks at 10-7. I think defensively they're going to get after it. I think they're going to be the team that people do not want to play, especially if it's a little chilly out, because I think they'll be able to run the ball. Their defense is going to be smacking people. And Kenneth he played at Michigan State. He knows how to run in the cold. It hurts. Trying to tackle him hurts. And Zach Charbonnet is a big boy. So I think they're going to be a tough team to deal with when it gets cold.
Yeah, I like the running backs here in Seattle. I don't know if I like them 10-7 good, but I get where you're coming from because this team does have that opportunity. They are a team that is very much decided by their own approach to the game, how well they play defensively specifically. You talk about their DBs as well. Don't forget they added 2 Auburn guys, which I'm going to call out every single time, but they added 2 of the better corners in this draft that didn't go in the top 2 rounds because if anybody remembers this draft, it was the wildest situations for corners I've ever seen where there wasn't a none taken anywhere what you were expecting. Like it was insane. So you had Nehemiah Pritchett being taken 136 and DJ James taken in the 6th round. There's 2 DBs that can help fill out the rest of this defense. And I'm not going to say go Legion of Boom style, but you're going to be playing a lot more nickel. You're going to be playing a lot more dime. And these guys love to go up and tackle, but they can cover with the best of them in the SEC, where most of the receivers are going to be facing are SEC caliber receivers, and then Marvin Harrison Jr. In their own division. So it's always worth. I guess I should shout out Cooper Kupp by himself as well. But everywhere else you look at this team, there's positives. You wonder if they're actually going to finally put it together. You mentioned Geno riding back. I don't think it's just Geno now. Now we've got to talk about the offensive line riding back. Now you got to talk about the defensive line riding back, and especially those linebackers. I think they need to have a big season for the Seahawks to end up 10-7. But yeah, I get where you're coming from, and it is a possibility. I personally don't agree, but I get where you're coming from.
They're definitely going to be a fun team to watch. That's what I think is for sure. I think then again, they did burn me pretty badly last year. So if they end up failing again this year, I will never pick them to go to the playoffs again. They will be permanently exiled after what they did to me last year. But as absolutely a shock to nobody, we will have the 49ers at the top of the NFC West, and I have them going 12-5. So, sorry, 11-6. Excuse me, I can't read my own writing. But I think they're going to be fine. They're still going to be the 49ers. They're going to go 4-2 in the division. I think Brandon Ayuk's not going anywhere. I think this is the Deebo Samuel situation from a couple of years ago, just drug on a little bit longer. I think they're going to find a way to somehow pay him, and they'll do something offseason. They're going to kick the can down the road one more year. They're going to be fine. They still have arguably the best defense in the NFL and arguably a top 5 offense. George Kittle's still the man. Deebo Samuel's still a weapon. Brandon Ayuk is still electric. Christian McCaffrey, moved on. Elijah Mitchell's still there as a backup. The offensive line's getting better too. I do like some of the picks they made because outside of Trent Williams is a little shaky. Now they fortified it up a bit. Not to mention you got Ricky Pearsall, the rookie, coming in. Kyle Juszczyk, the juice. There's just too much to like about this team, so I don't think the Super Bowl hangover, quote unquote, is going to kill them this year. So we're going to put them at 11-6. Very not as dominant as last year, but I think they'll be very good.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Obviously, 49ers, they are what they are, right? They are the most effective offense with the least number of yards covered in any pass. And that's a wild thought, but Brock Purdy does it and does it well, and I will applaud him every single time he makes the right move on this in a game, because we don't hate game managers here. Game managers is not a swear word on this podcast. We are game manager stands because game managers win Super Bowls. Look, they haven't gotten there yet. They haven't won the title yet, but they've gotten there twice in the last 5 years, and one with Jimmy, one with Brock. Now, if you keeping this team together, obviously there's questions over Trent Williams' holdout. Will he come back? Will he be healthy? Will he be ready to play? 36 years old. I'm not concerned as long as he shows up. Brandon Ayuk, on the other hand, there are questions, right? Will that contract get done? Obviously, that was a holdout. Will that affect this team? I don't think so, but I get where, personally, 11-6 feels a little low for how good the Niners could be. But you also have the rest of this division a little bit stronger than maybe even I'm thinking they are. So I see where the 11 comes from, because I can see a couple losses happening in division if they're just not on their P's and Q's. But we're talking about one of the great teams all around. But I do have a question to ask you about this.
What's up?
If Brandon Ayuk is not there at the midway point this year, does it change your outlook for better or worse?
Not really. It doesn't change a whole lot. He's awesome, but like you said, and I'm going to pull up our comment here from Billy as well. What a toolbox to manage for Purdy. It's not just any type, but he's got a Craftsman like 550 pure solid gold tool chest to work out of. That's like
Yeah.
14 rows by 14 feet. Like he's got some weapons work. I think Ricky Pearsall's nice. I think he'll fit in that role nicely if they have to. Jennings is still there too. We forget you're almost Super Bowl pick at Super Bowl MVP Jennings as well. They
Man,
they they find a
things if
way.
they happen. If they had
Yep.
happened, that'd have been so nice. That money would have been real pretty.
Things just work. They just find a way to make it work. So 11 is if IU's there, maybe they're more 12-5. But you know what? They're still just really good. I do think there's just going to be tougher division. Schedule's a little bit tougher this year too. So I think 11-6 feels fair. Might be a little bit lowballing, but at the same time, I think it feels right. You know what? It feels right. They're going to be fine. They might not be as dominant as they were last year, where they were crushing everybody, minus like a 3-week stretch when they lost 3 in a row. We won't. I don't think we'll see Debo wearing black Air Force Ones to a game and then standing on business and scoring 3 touchdowns and 42 fantasy points. I don't know if we'll see that necessarily as weekly, but I think they're going to be fine.
Yeah. And also I think it's worth mentioning they did get healthier in the offseason. Obviously, losing I can't think of his name right now. Middle linebacker / safety guy who is just a jack of all trades, whose
Oh,
name is
Hufanga?
escaping me. Yes, thank you. Getting healthy, and he comes to this defense, and all of a sudden, guess what? You have a instant playmaker on defense who, if he was there in the Super Bowl, I believe changes things.
Very much so. It's definitely something we'll keep an eye on. But I'll go and quickly recap the NFC West for me, starting from the bottom to the top. The bottom, I got the Rams at 7-10. 3, I have the Cardinals at 9-8. Number 2, we have the Seahawks at 10-7. And at 1, the aforementioned 49ers at 11-6. And Kelcey, it is your turn. You said I see where you're coming from, but I disagree on a lot of them. So I'm curious to see where we disagree on.
Yeah, first thing I just want to throw this up here. LA Rams contender for division title as well. I will come to this in a minute, but I just wanted to throw it up there because it is worth a conversation potentially.
A little prelude. Okay.
Yeah, a little prelude to the future. But yeah, no, we're going to start at the bottom, and just like you, we're going to work our way up to the top because that's how we do things here. Starting at the bottom, I'm going to the Seattle Seahawks, 6-11. You have Geno riding back somewhat. I don't have them riding back. And the big
we have it
reason
the opposite way. You have him riding back. I have him not riding back.
That's fair. Yeah, I guess that's fair. But no, this is one I look at the Seahawks, 6-11. I do think there's a lot of good pieces here. I have a big question when it comes to spreading the ball out to these receivers who need the ball. DK does need the ball. He needs to hit 1,000 or he needs to hit 10 touchdowns. That's just his stats. He has to get them. I worry that they're going to try too hard to get him his stats, and JSN and Tyler Lockett are going to struggle. And it's not because they're struggling, but it's because whoever their starting quarterback is trying to force the ball to DK. And I do mean that even in double coverage. And that's the worst thing that could happen. There's also a just great tight end that sits there that does not get burned whatsoever in this offense still, and Noah Fant, who just I want to see him get burned. I want to see him get touches and see if he can make an impact. So there's 4 guys you have to try to target on this team immediately. That's not including Zach Charbonnet, who you mentioned. That's not including Kenneth Walker, who I think Kenneth Walker is probably the 4th best running back in the league, and nobody's really ready to have that conversation. But when he's healthy, he's shown production game in and game out. And I'm just going to say he's talented, but there's problems, and there's a lot of mouths to feed. And I don't think this offense is necessarily built to feed all these mouths at the same time. So we'll see how they go through the season. But I think if they stay intact as they are now, and no offense to Geno, because I appreciate Geno, I appreciate his story, and I appreciate how he got here, I don't think he's the right quarterback to make this offense click. This is no longer a necessarily game management style quarterbacking crew. This is one that you do need a little bit more dynamic ability as a quarterback to succeed. And that's just the nature of this offense, the nature of the receivers you have. You do need to give them time to get open. JSN, he's a route technician. And then you have Tyler Lockett, who is the exact same thing, but from the mid to deep range. So he's got to get time to get
40 yards downfield. He does the same thing, just he doesn't do it under 30.
He does it long down the field. Then you have DK, who we all know, you give DK a 9, he's going to take it to the house. But he also is going to be bracketed on that 9 the entire time. So there's questions for how to get these guys fed. And that's where I'm at with this team. I have no hate to anybody else on this team. They have a bunch of Auburn guys representing, but at the same time, I cannot in good conscience give them more than 6-11 personally, but I can see where this could flip because if they figure it out, this team will flip. This team will be potentially an 11-6 team. But I'm thinking right now, as is, 6-11 is the best they're going to give us.
I'm going to ask you this in the nicest way possible. Who was your favorite team besides Auburn in college football last year?
Last year? Oh, gosh.
Just your favorite to watch.
I think Washington. And obviously, I know why that's the case. I know why you asked that question because I knew where it was going. And I get it. The difference,
I know, obviously, it's apples to pears. So I will preface it's not. It is apples to pears, but I do think compared when Shane Waldron was there, which is why I'm not touching Keenan Allen in fantasy football because I'm worried he's going to be relegated to that third receiver who doesn't get the ball. However, I do think with what Waldron does, they're going to the way they run like a bunch with a one by set. I think they're going to find a way to get. I know what you're saying. It's going to be tough to get them all involved. But if it's Shane Waldron again, I'm like, nope, there's too many miles of feet. Somebody's getting left out and someone's going to get pissed. But I think as long as Geno Smith is Genoing, they'll be okay. As long as he's not getting punched in the face by a teammate. Or maybe they're throwing Sam Howell. I'm just saying. Maybe he'll throw it up for better or for worse.
But here's the thing. And there's, again, it's no offense to Geno. I just don't think his arm talent is equal to, let's say, Michael Penix. We mentioned the Washington comparison. So we're going to go there. I don't think his arm talent is equal to or greater than Michael Penix at all. I will also say, yeah, absolutely. My mind changes very quickly. But I'll also say, if you look at Washington's offense last year, you have. Sorry, I'm reading.
I'm tooting my own horn as someone who agrees with me on this one.
And look, I agree with that statement as well. But I also think I have all faith in Keenan Allen because in Keenan Allen I trust. He has gotten me too far in fantasy leagues to not trust him. But no, anyways, I look back to this Washington team in comparison to this Seattle team this year. I look at Jalen Polk. He was a guy who could be impactful at times, but he was very limited in his impact last year at Washington. And so now I look to compare him. Who is he on the Seahawks as that third option? And obviously, yes, Polk did get injured. So that's part of this conversation. But I look at Tyler Lockett, who has struggles with injuries, who is very similar in the technician role. Can he stay productive in an offense like this throughout the season? Because if he is, then again, this team could flip on its head. Because again, I'm not really worried about the defense. I think the defense will step up at times this season and be the reason they win games. I just think their offense is going to be the thing that lets them down. And I mean, no offense to Geno. It's just there's a lot of mouths to feed now. And these guys have grown up. DK needs his. Tyler Lockett needs his. JSN is going to need his very quickly. And we all know Kenneth Walker needs his. So how are you going to make that work? And Zach Charbonnet might be the best backup back in the league.
There's one way that I think everyone can get happy and this not be an issue. And I think it's one thing they're going to do surprisingly well this year, explosive plays. Yeah. I think they're going to have a lot of those explosive plays. So DK won't get 12 targets, but he'll get 4 for a $105 and a touch. JSN will get his 8 targets, but he'll catch like 6 for 75 and move the chains. So I think that's where I'm also on it. But we've been in the Pacific Northwest. We already know anyone who's from there is watching hates us right now. We could spend all day talking about this one since we have polar opposites. We got a long ways to go, so I'm going to let you roll through.
Yeah. We'll move on to the number 3 here. I feel like I'm beating up on Seattle enough here. Sorry, 12, man. Yeah. Now we're going to go beat up on the Arizona Cardinals. 8 and 9 is where I have the Cardinals here, third in the division. Like I said, I wasn't far off from your 9 and 8 for the Cardinals. I think they're a good team. I think they can be a good team. While their defense is not great, it's not necessarily the big hole suspect that it once was. But it's still not good. It's still not pretty in any way, shape, or form. And then that offensive line needs help. Period. End of conversation. Kyler Murray didn't play half of last year because of an injury he suffered because his offensive line sucked.
Was there in person for that one? That's actually where I got this fancy cup over here too. So I turned my back for 2 seconds and I looked down and his ACL shatters from a non-contact injury. I couldn't believe it.
And it's one of those things like, yes, people are like, but he didn't get touched. Absolutely. But he had to scramble and he injured himself because his offensive line was giving up constant pressure that entire game. So this is another situation where the Cardinals, if you watched our college super show on Monday, you'll know my conversation on the Clemson Tigers and Dabo Sweeney getting linemen. Copy and paste that conversation to the Arizona Cardinals and bringing in protection for Kyler Murray because they continue to fail to bring in quality protection for Kyler. And again, I hope I'm wrong. They have rookies, they have second-year guys who should be able to step up in that offensive position. But part of me also wonders if I'm thinking like the Bengals fans were when they took Jamar Chase instead of taking Penei Sewell. If that makes sense? And if anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, there was an argument over whether Jamar Chase should go instead of Penei Sewell to the Bengals. And everybody said, oh, you need to take Penei so you can protect Joe Burrow. Well, they go to the Super Bowl with Jamar Chase. They don't go to the Super Bowl with Penei Sewell. So I'm wondering if this is a situation like that where you took MHJ and so now you have that ability to go beyond. I also think one underrated player on this team, and it's somebody who stepped up last year, is Greg Dortch. I do think he's got the talent to be good. I think he has the knowledge to get into open spaces, and him and Kyler seem to have a good rapport, which is huge for that situation. Kyler gets out of the pocket. You need somebody to dump it off to besides Trey McBride. I think Greg Dortch could be that guy. So I think there's positives here. I just don't think maybe they're necessarily there yet. So that's where I'm at with the Cardinals, 8-9. I don't know, not bad, but not great.
I do like Dortch. He's definitely a sleeper pick if you're looking for a late fantasy one or a dynasty pick late. I think he's a good pickup as well too. You might have to take him in free agency and dynasty, but I think he's a good solid pickup, especially if you have one of those like 3 receivers, 3 tight end, 3 flex leagues where you just have so many openings. He could be somebody to pop in there. They did add Jonah Williams, I just realized too. So not great offensive lineman, but ironic the Joe Burrow connection when you made that as well. So I'm in the same way. Like we have the same record. I spent all my time on the Seahawks, so I don't spend much time here, but I think they're very close, but at the same time, very far. If let's say the 49ers struggle, that Super Bowl hangover kicks them, or they go on a weird stretch like the Eagles did last year where they just couldn't do anything right, then I think this team could very easily sneak up and take that division, especially if we get your version of the Seahawks and that version of the 49ers. They could sneak up and pull a Houston on us real quick, fast in a hurry, and do that worst of first. But at the same time, they could go 6-11 and be back at the bottom. They're the I'm not betting on this team at all. Like this is the one I'm not betting real money on them.
I'm only betting on them in one game and one game only all year. And it's one of the games against the Rams because that just seems to be how they do it.
You know what? That's fair. Like they will find a way. Like they'll find a way to pull that one off. I'll say I'm not taking their preseason over unders anything like that unless it's set at like 5. Then maybe I'll go over 5. But I think it's set at 6.5.
Yeah, no, we're not touching that at all. But now I really do want to go back here real fast to this comment. Because now we're here. We're at that point. I have 2 teams left in the NFC West. Rams are a contender for the division title. Absolutely. Do I give it to them? DJ, what do you think? Do I give it to them?
Let me just grab my challenge flag just in case you do.
No, the answer is no. I have the Rams here, number 2 in the division, 8-9 as well. However, and this is a huge caveat, they go 4-2 in division. I think this team is good, but I think the injuries, and this is just where I'm at with this team. I think Cooper coming back from injury, Puka going down with injury, Stafford continuously having the shoulder injury. I am concerned, to say the least. And then obviously you mentioned Kyron. Yeah, absolutely concerned. I do think Blake Corum will be a fantastic piece, but they still never replaced their left tackle that got them to the Super Bowl and won a Super Bowl.
Or any of the other offensive linemen, really.
Yeah, Andrew Whitworth obviously not being there. He's in the booth now. Havenstein was not the guy. And so can they figure it out? Can they get enough offensive linemen in there to help protect Stafford, keep his shoulder from dying, and help keep Blake Corum getting into the end zone? Because he does have a knack to get in the end zone. He showed it in Michigan. He showed it back in his days in Baltimore playing high school football there, leading the nation in touchdown rushes for a running back at that level, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, I think this team is good. I think they have the pieces, but I think they lost some important pieces that would take them to that next level of being a division winner. But I do think they do have really good pieces in place if they can just stay healthy, which right now they're not healthy. So I can't really give them more than 8-9 in this one.
Ironically enough, I have them at 4. You have them at 2. We have 1 win difference. So I don't have too much to add to the Rams either. I think if they are healthy, we saw what happened last year when they were mostly healthy. They were very good. So I think if they can stay mostly healthy this year, they could be in the thick of it. I'm picking against history as well as injury with this one. That's why I'm picking again to them to be quote unquote worse this year at 7-10. I don't even have them being bad. So I don't got much on here. I've used all my time for the Seahawks once again. So I have forfeited my time.
All right. Well, we'll move on then. First place obviously being the 49ers, 13-4. I have them a little bit higher than you do. I have
Just
a
a
little
bit.
more faith, but I think it comes in division is why I have them a little bit higher, and that's because they go 6-0 in division.
Oh, wow.
I think on paper this team has everybody in the division's number because just given their strengths versus everybody else's weakness, everybody else in this division does struggle on the offensive line. Seahawks may be the better of the three other teams, but the defensive line for the 49ers is a monster in and of itself. So I do think that's why I put the Niners here at number 1, 6-0 in their division, 13-4. I just think they're too good, and it's so easy for Brock Purdy's career to just continue to kill you with whatever open guy is there. And I'm not trying to sell him short or anything in that. I'm saying that is a brilliant ability to have as a quarterback, that you have weapons that if you're smart enough as a quarterback to use, you will win. And that's the whole thing with game managers, why I love game managers, why we talk about positive things about game managers, is because you just have to use what's available to you to win. That's all game manager is. It's just using the talents that are around you to make the best play. Seems very simple, yet we constantly see super talents in the league not able to use the talents around them to succeed. Whether that's a coaching fault, whether that's the player's fault, completely not the point of this conversation. It's just a fact that people do not use those talents that are around them. And having a quarterback that can and having a coaching staff that gives him that trust is huge for Brock Purdy. It's huge for the Niners. It's why the Niners right now are on a run they haven't seen since the 90s. And that's sucks to see it as a person who does not like the Niners. But you know what? Yeah, here they are, 13-4, top of the division yet again.
I will say, I think Brock, his biggest attribute is his ability to speed read the field and get through it quickly. So I think that's, despite all of his limitations otherwise, and the fact that he's doing with the Avenger squad out there, I think there's a reason he's doing it better than Jimmy Garoppolo did, arguably. There's a reason he's doing it in Trey Lance's in Dallas right now. There's a reason that he is the guy over whoever else they could have brought in. So I think definitely don't want to sell him short on that, because what he does very well. It is exemplified because he has the pieces to do it with exceptionally high level out of the gate. Is a 7th round draft pick. It's not like he's the first overall pick and is doing this, so it was expected.
Mr. Irrelevant.
Exactly. And he's still very, very good. They went what, 13-4 last year. They could easily go 13-4 this year. It's like they're never out of it with that squad.
And their defense last year, let's not forget, if they scored 19 points or less, any other team they played, they were undefeated. How crazy is that for a team to have a stat where they don't score 20 and they're undefeated? Like, if you can hold the Niners or hold the opposing team if you're the Niners to under 20 points, you're winning every time.
They got a squad there, so like there is absolutely no reason that they can't do this again as well. There's some questions, there's some concerns, but that being said, like that's still that on paper, that's arguably a top 3 team in the NFL on paper, something like that. Like it's, by the way, it was 19 points. It was 19 points because the Browns scored 19 and beat them. But you were right.
Yeah, sorry. Under 19 points. My
sorry,
bad.
I had to give your hometown the love there. So that's
not my hometown. I just happen to live here.
Your living town, however you want to call it. But at the same point stands, all right, 19. It's 1 point difference. That's absolutely insane. In today's NFL, where points can randomly come in abundance.
You never know. And also, they have the 2 best blocking non-linemen, I think, in the league.
If not, they're in the conversation. Like it's a short list.
They're definitely top 3, and they're not number 3. No offense to Monra, but you might be number 3 in this list. So they're I mean, look, they're talented all across the board. So just a recap, though, starting with the bottom, working my way up for the NFC West, we have the Seahawks at 6-11, the Cardinals at 8-9, the Rams winning on division record at 8-9 and taking the second place spot here. And then you have the Niners 13-4 being dominant like they should be.
Absolutely. And now for our unanimous fan vote, or our anonymous fan vote, excuse me, from the bottom to the top, we have the Cardinals at 7-10, the Rams at 9-8, the Seahawks at 9-8, and the 49ers at 11-6. So where it is different, it is the same, and where it is the same, it is different. So that is what we have for the NFC West. And if you ever want to plan on going to those games, especially on the East Coast, those plane tickets could be a little pricey. So you definitely want to save a little bit of money if you're going to get those game tickets. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. And if you need to do that, head on over to our good friends, SeatGeek.com. Get $20 off your first purchase with code BellyUpSports. I know that's how DJ got to watch Kyler Murray last year. Unfortunately, he did not watch Kyler Murray for long because he took his eyes off the field and the man was down. But no, we enjoy everything getting to watch SeatGeek or getting to watch these games in person with SeatGeek. So be sure to go over to SeatGeek.com and get $20 off your first purchase with code BellyUpSports. And that way you can go watch some NFC West or the division we're about to get into, the AFC West.
Absolutely. The AFC West, where there's one king to rule them all, one king to leave them all in darkness. However, if you want to just go with the full Lord of the Rings, they have Sauron at the top of the division. They do have there's been a lot of fun changes in the division this year, I think we can say, though, in this offseason. Like, you could call it hope, I guess, like unrealistic hope as well. So, hope, or at least competitiveness, however you want to slice it. But for this one, every week we try and break out some kind of apparel for one of the divisions. I don't have a whole lot of AFC West stuff, but I do have our HighLowSports Chargers shirt from a few years ago as well. So we got a little bit of something each week going strong. But AFC West, I'm going to keep this one relatively quick because we already know how it's going to end. I think it's everything that leads up to that that's kind of similar. So I'll start from the bottom to the top. At the bottom, I do have the Denver Broncos. I do have them finishing with a 5-12 record. I do think they did just name Bo Nix a starter. I was tempted to give them maybe 6 wins because I like Bo Nix a lot. I think he's going to be very, very good. I think he's going to be arguably a top 3 quarterback in this class when we look back on it in 3 or so years. I think his game just translates really well to the NFL, and it shows a progressive, steady increase. And it's not dependent on a lot of it is his mind. Like, he's an athlete with a good arm, but that's not how his game's predicated on. So I think that is going to translate very well for a longer-term career. My only concern is he's on Denver. That's the only problem I have, is that team's a mess, and I don't know if I believe in Sean Payton without Drew Brees. We'll see if he can make it work. We'll see. I don't know. It's an interesting matchup. I do like me some Bo Nix, but still gonna have the Broncos at 5-12. I think Bo Nix is going to show flashes. I'm focusing on him because the rest of the team, it's rough. If Bo Nix wasn't on this team and it was Zach Wilson or Jared Stidham, I got this at 1-15 or 1-16. There's a lot of holes. It's Patrick Surtain and Bo Nix at this point. Cortland Sutton's still nice. They just got to get him the ball. Marvin Mims, there's some potential there. Got to get him the ball, but they do have your boy Quinn Miners at guard, at well-deserved paycheck he got as well. So there's some work to do. If Bo Nix is as good as I think he will be, maybe they'll go up to 6 or 7 wins. I know they kind of lucked into 8 last year. That's kind of their ceiling, but I'm going to stick with 5-12. Bo Nix, the white Jalen Hurts, I'm saying it right now. I think they're going to be good. I think it'll be 5-12, but you'll see promises moving forward.
I think Jared was just watching the show and then dipped out as soon as he heard white Jalen Hurts. He's like, nope, I'm out. Don't need to hear this one.
I'll break it down real quick. They're both sons of coaches. They both took a little bit longer to get going coming in college as well. They both say pretty much all the right things. Like, every time you hear them talk, it's like, damn, say something wrong for once. And I think they kind of are going to have that steady progression where it's like a little rough, and they're going to boom onto it, then kind of hit that status moving forward. So it's not an insult to Jalen Hurts at all. I'm complimenting where I think Bo Nix's trajectory is. I'm not saying that he's that right now. Rookie Jalen Hurts, rookie Bo Nix. I think that's not a unreasonable comparison. If anyone remembers rookie Jalen Hurts, there was some work to do, but he was still. But you liked what you had coming out. So think of it as a compliment for Bo Nix, not an insult to Jalen Hurts, Jared. So relax.
Yeah, let's not forget.
Not even here. We're already telling him to relax. That's how goofy he is. But I just think Bo Nix is going to be really good in the NFL, a better NFL quarterback than a college quarterback. And the Bo Nix experience at Auburn, I think, is slowly but surely going to start to mitigate into the pass a little bit.
I coined the term a few years back about that entire Bo Nix experience, and I'll be the first one to admit that that's mostly down to that offense sucking. That offensive game plan was just,
Gus hated him.
Get him in a team where he can use his brain and use his wheels. Because let's not forget, this guy was the number 1 dual threat quarterback in his class. And he was the number 1 dual threat quarterback when he reclassified to a year earlier class. So he is very talented. He does have wheels. He does have athleticism, and he has an arm to show. Now he added the brains and the understanding of how to read a defense. So I get it. I like the Bo Nix idea. By the way, and this is where I'm going to stop it at, is Bo Nix is now going to be the first rookie quarterback to start for the Broncos since John Elway.
I'm not going to call him John Elway, just like his why you stopped there as well. But you know what? That's good company. However you find your way in that conversation, that'll do, right? Like, however you find your way in there.
Yeah, just got to be there. Just got to be in the club. That's all that they ask.
Absolutely not. So I'm definitely curious to see his progression long term, but this year it's still going to be rough for Denver. I'm going to have them at 5-12. Speaking of going to be a little bit rough, we do have the Las Vegas Raiders now led by Antonio Pierce full time, not just as an intern. I still have them going 6-11 though. I think they have a lot to like. I really like that defensive line with Christian Wilkins, Max Crosby. If Tyree Wilson can stay healthy, they got something going on there. Defensively, with secondary, they overperformed last year. They were really good as well. Offensively, they're so interesting. Like they are just Devontae Adams is still Devontae Adams. Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer, like that's a top 3 tight end combination before we've seen Brock Bowers play, just presuming he's like 70% of what we think he'll be. And I think we think he's going to be awesome. I mean, Trey Tucker's all right. Jacoby Myers is a solid number 2. Offensive line, there's not bad, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. Where the Raiders' offensive line used to be a punchline. Now it's Jackson Powers Johnson, Colton Miller. Like they got some players there. Zamir White's going to hurt somebody when they try to tackle him. The problem is who's taking the snaps and who's throwing the ball. Gardner Minshew, for better or for worse, we'll see. He's named the starter for week 1, so we'll see how long it lasts. There's some good, there's some bad, there's some ugly with him. We kind of already know the story. Like he can win you some games when all things go right. When things go wrong, it can get kind of ugly. We'll see. Aiden O'Connell, I don't know if that. It feels like this team's gearing up to sign Dak Prescott next year. They're just waiting in the next year when the Cowboys are like, you know what, Dak, we're not giving you $70 million a year, and then the Raiders are like, we'll do it, and then Dak goes in there and wins an MVP throwing to Devontae Adams, and all Cowboys fans are like, you got to be kidding me.
Don't say those words.
It's okay. The Cowboys end up winning more games the other way, like Trey Lance season. Either way, it works out, or Cooper Rush season. But either way, that being said, I think the Raiders are building in the right direction, but it still feels like a 6-11. They overachieved at 8-9 last year and got on a roll with a new interim coach. They made the right move this time with an interim coach and keeping him after going on a run and not getting rid of him for Josh McDoofus and ruining Derek Carr's Raiders career and Hunter Renfro's Raiders career. But I'm going to give him 6-11 and building for the future.
All right. You know what? 2 things. You've got Harrison Bryant, who, by the way, is also a Raider. So
I'm not going to list the entire depth chart of tight ends. We'll be here all day.
I'm just saying, you're talking about 3 tight ends that all won the award for best tight end in college football their last year in college.
Can they run 3 tight end, 1 receiver sets instead now? Like, you know what? 3 tight ends and Devontae. That's it.
I mean, just maybe. Also, you mentioned the offensive line. I think also you add in Gardner into this. I think this is a situation where the Raiders embody their coach and are just going to beat up the other team. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but they are just going to out-physical the other team if they can. The problem is, I think in today's day and age, I don't think you're wrong with a 6-11 pick for them is because out-physicaling only can take you so far in today's NFL. And that's always going to be a concern. And with these kind of old school mentality type coaches, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Will this one work out? I hope so. But I don't know. Also, I guess I lied. There's a third thing. Gardner Minshew, better stats than Trevor Lawrence since Trevor Lawrence has been in the league. Weird NFL stat for you.
Gardner Minshew didn't have to play a year with Urban Meyer. But yes, I know what you're saying at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's just more of just one of those caveat weird pieces of it all.
Funny. It is funny to look at that too. Like when things are going good, Gardner can be very good. It's when they're going a little bit rough. It's like, oh great, here we go.
Yeah. This is the one that this is why I like the eye test and not just stats for everything. If anybody doesn't know my complaints on stats, just only stat only recommendations, because this is one of those things where you're just like, oh well, Blake Bortles is better than Trevor Lawrence. No. Gardner Minshew is better than Trevor Lawrence. No. Not necessarily as a better quarterback, but
it just means we need to see a little more from Trevor moving forward, but we've seen the capability there. But I think what's interesting with the Raiders too is they were a little bit too good last year. If they could have sucked just a little bit more and got a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix, I think I'd have this team at 9-8, honestly. Like they have a lot to like. There's just some holes at some key spots that worry me a little bit. But either way, with the Raiders, that'll move us on. We already know how the order's going to go. The next one, we do have the Chargers, a much improved Chargers team, I think, this year. We're going to put them at 8-9, 3-3 in the division. Harbaugh, Greg Roman, they are going to run the piss out of the ball. Gus Bus might lead the NFL in touchdowns with less than 100 carries. Because as soon as they get within the 20, like, Gus, get in there. Like he did with the Ravens last year, just on cracked out at this point. I retract that. He will have over 300 carries. I got that the wrong way. J.K. Dobbins, if he can stay healthy, he's going to have his own 300 carries. And then you got Vidal, you have Vidal as well, who's going to be their change. They're going to run the heck out of the ball. It's going to make Justin Herbert a little rough to take in fantasy, but that's fantasy football. We're talking about non-fantasy right now. They're them like the Raiders in a similar vein. They're just going to hurt. Playing them is just going to hurt. I think defensively, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, the fact that they both took pay cuts to stay is very telling. I do think Derwin James, we're going to see a revitalization a little bit. Asante Samuel Jr. will see kind of that revitalization off of last year. I think Kenneth Murray is still there, if I'm not mistaken, as well. They do have a lot of pieces, and I really like Jesse Minter coming as the defensive coordinator. What he was doing at Michigan was absolutely outstanding. Just schematically, what he puts together. Once again, this is kind of like what I talked about with Mike McDonald. We're not going to go too deep into the weeds on it, but he is an outstanding defensive coordinator that within the next 365 times, within the next 700 or so days, he's going to be a head coach in the NFL. He is that good. The only thing that's really holding this Chargers team back right now is who they're in the division with. Justin Herbert being hurt right now. And unfortunately, they still have a few holes that they can't just patch up in one offseason. I think Ladd McConkey is going to be awesome. I know it's fun to make fun of him because he's the white receiver from Georgia, but he's more than actually just the white slot receiver. He's actually, his athletic profile compares to Chris Olave. And it's weird to say that because they do not look the same when they play. It's like when you said Andrew Luck and Cam Newton had the same athletic profile, but watching them both run, it did not look that way. One of them looked like a white person running, and that was Andrew. I think you see the same thing with Ladd McConkey a little bit. I think he's going to be awesome. He's going to be productive. Quentin Johnson, if he can put two hands on the football and hold on to it, that gives him another deep threat. They're going to be fine. They're going to be better than they were last year. There's going to be a clear upward trajectory at the back end of the season. And at this point next year, they're going to be everybody's hot pick to upset the Chiefs and take the division. But right now, we're going to give them at 8 and 9. They're going to be very good, and them and the Raiders are just going to hurt to play. When you get done with that game, you're going to be like, ow.
Yeah, I feel like the Chargers are setting up for a pot shot team. And if you don't know what I mean, it's very simple. Run, 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 run. Oh, second and long. Throw it up 50 yards because they're crashing into the box. And they're going to score a touchdown. That's just how this offense feels. It feels like what they were trying to do with Lamar and that trio of running backs 2 years ago. Obviously, Greg Roman in correlation there. I do think
49er teams with Greg Roman.
Yeah, I do think this is one of those things where you look at this team and they're very good at what they're going to want to do this year. But you have a Ferrari at quarterback. You got to help them out is my thing. I have a differing opinion on the Chargers. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But we'll just say, I think this defense will be very good. And by the way, Kenneth Murray is no longer with the Chargers. He is with the Titans now.
Oh, well, either way, my point is that all the other guys I named that were much more important to that conversation.
Yeah, all the rest of the guys are actually playing and effective right now. Kenneth Murray at some point in time last year just was gone. He was already in Tennessee before ever being in Tennessee.
It was already over. But I'll also add on to that just to wrap up my thoughts on them as well. I really like the Joe All pick to go along with Rashawn Slater, a former second-team All-Pro Rashawn Slater, I believe, who was hurt last year. Your bookend tackles now, my goodness. I don't care which one's on the right and which one's on the left. You talk about that Ferrari. You don't need any more chip blocking. Like you can go 5 out in most passing situations if you need to and let him just – you're not too worried about an edge rush. You're just worried about the interior guys holding up so he could step up. So I love what they're doing offensive line-wise. There's a lot to like. It's just not quite love yet. And that they're in the division with the team at the top of the division, which is the 6-time AFC West champion, Kansas City Chiefs, going for 7, if I'm not mistaken. I might even be underselling them. It might actually be 8 years in a row. It's been since 2016, so I think 8 years now. If I'm not, this will be year number 8. I have them 12-5, 5-1 in the division. Somebody will sneak one by them. There's not a lot to say. They still have probably the best defense in the division, even losing L'Jarius Sneed. It's going to be a different type of defense because of what he did was very specifically his specific set of skills made this defense elite. I think Trent McDuffie's a better overall corner possibly, but he doesn't have to do the same thing Sneed did as far as beating the you-know-what out of receivers at the line and being fast enough to run with them at the back end of it. You're not having Trent McDuffie fight Tyreek Hill off the line. That's just reckless. L'Jarius Sneed's one of a handful of guys who could do that. I think defensively, though, they're still one of the youngest defenses in the game. Hollywood Brown, he's injured right now. He'll be back mid-season at the latest. I think they said it's a 4-week injury or so. Xavier Worthy, whatever you want to say, him and Patrick Mahomes' arm is going to terrorize people, and it's back to 2 high safeties every play. Travis Kelcey, until proven otherwise, is still effective. Isaiah Pacheco, I think, is going to crack 1,100, 1,200 yards rushing this year. I think the box is going to be so light, and that offensive line's still good. It's the Kansas City Chiefs. They've won 3 out of the last 5 Super Bowls, and they're the 2-time defending champions. They're going to go 12-5. They're going to win the division. The season doesn't start till January for them. This is all cruise control. I'm not going to spend any more time on Kansas City.
Okay.
It's redundant at this point.
Yeah. Moving on.
Yeah, so that I'll go ahead and wrap up the AFC West for me really quickly for those just tuning in. At the bottom, I have the Broncos at 5-12. At third, I have the Raiders at 6-11. At 2, I have the Chargers at 8-9. And at the top, we have the Kansas City Chiefs at 12-5. So, Kelcey, you, my good friend, are up. And like you said, there's some things that are the same, but some things are quite different.
Yeah, some same, some different.
Hmm.
And I know that doesn't work, but I'm going with it anyways.
Hmm.
We're going to start at the bottom, and we're going to work our way up. And just like you, DJ, this is where they're the same. Broncos, 5-12. And no, don't worry, we're not on replay here, guys. Yeah, it's just what it is. I don't think we need to talk about it more. I think this team is full of holes, and there's some great pieces, but there's still holes. And you got to fix them. You got to figure out which running back's actually going to carry the load. Is it going to be Javonte? Is it going to be Jalil? Who's going to be the guy toting the ball to help Bo Nix out? And you got to figure out a second receiver. Because is it going to be Franklin? Is it going to be somebody else? You don't know yet. Tight end, also still a question.
They could really use a Noah Fant right now.
Surprise. Anyways, so I don't think I need to harp on the Broncos anymore. But fun fact, they do have 2 quarterbacks that are from Auburn. So, surprise. Anyways, moving on. Number 3, the Raiders at 9-8. A little bit better than you had them. I do like them. I do think they're going to surprise some people, and I do think they're going to beat up on some people in the right ways at the right times. And I think Antonio Pierce learned from last year. He can't just beat up on everybody, so he's going to have a little finesse in the game. And I do trust Gardner. I might be one of the bigger Gardner stands out there where when you have an outright number 1 receiver, you can't have a better quarterback than Gardner Minshew. And that sounds silly, but the dude just says, you know what? I can throw it over a mountain, so I'm going to throw it to Devontae. And
Uncle Rico's going to put it up.
That's just what he's going to do. Also, I've been stumbling through random TikToks of Gardner Minshew training montages to like,
oh boy, you're lost
Africa and things like that, and it's just hilarious. It's one of those just meme quality level things. Just we'll never forget those. So I guess maybe a little bit of bias there, but no, I do think the Raiders are going to surprise some folks. That defensive line is still quality. I do like Divine Diablo in the middle of their linebacking core. I think he fits what Antonio Pierce wants to do for that linebacking core, which is just be physical and fly to the ball. And I do think their secondary is getting a lot better. Now they might actually keep a secondary throughout an entire season. So yeah, I think this team is one to watch. Yes, there are still holes. There's no doubt about that, but they might sneak up and beat up some people.
I still love Trayvon Merrick at safety too. I think he's going to be dynamic.
Absolutely.
I think Antonio Pierce is a very good defensive minded coach to have with some of the players they have. And I'm curious to see how Luke Getsy integrates this offense too. Coming over from Chicago, where obviously that experiment did not work out. One thing he did though is he ran more 2 tight end sets than anyone in the league, and you got 2 of them in Vegas. So it's a match made in heaven there, I suppose.
Yeah, you got a boatload in Vegas. So we'll see if it comes up 21 when you need it.
Right. Excuse me, sorry, Harrison Bryan. 3 tight ends in Vegas.
Yeah, they're going to be looking for a bunch of 21s this season. No snake eyes. That's all we ask. So we're going to move on to number 2 in the division. And well, DJ, like you, I have the Chargers. Unlike you, I have faith in the Chargers. 11-6. And I maybe foreshadowed when I talked about potched out offenses because I love them. I think they're very fun to run. I think they're very fun to use on Madden. And I'm going to say, screw it. Let's see if it works in real life. Because I think this is one where we're going to see Harbaugh just absolutely trying to beat people up with the run. And then as soon as they sneak an extra man into the box, Quentin Johnson, Josh Palmer, somebody's going to be over the top for a touchdown. And it's stupid to say it out loud because it seems so obvious. But when you're in the flow of the game and a team is running at you with 2 different monsters of a running back, whether they're fully healthy or not, doesn't matter. They can still fall forward for 3 yards. We all know J.K. Dobbins can figure out a way to carry somebody 3 yards when healthy. Obviously, there are questions about the recovery from ACLs, all that. Gus, though, I'm not really concerned about him carrying too much because That dude is built like a bus and will literally put people on his back like he is a public bus system. So yeah, I'm okay with this. Let it happen. I do want you to use Justin Herbert more, but I'm not going to hate on you. And I finally will stand by yet again another season, and I will probably die on this hill that Asante Samuel Jr. will step up as one of the best corners in the league.
I love all this, and I really hope it happens, honestly. I really hope it does, and I want to see Justin Herbert finally get not only take that next step himself, but have everyone around him join him. And I think
Yeah.
this is the coach and the start to do it, and I hope you are right and they kind of accelerate. If he was healthier right now, if he wasn't in a boot 10 minutes ago, I'd be a little more I'm exaggerating. Like I'd be a little more comfortable with it, but I like the Chargers. I hope you are right. I really if it clicks like the way you said, 11-6 might even be potentially actually, you know what, that might be right on cue because they still have to deal with that other team, but that's right on cue.
Yeah, and hey, there's a couple receivers they can go pick up in the free agency still that could help out in the season.
There might
But
be
I do
one or
love
two in
what
Cincinnati that if there's a contract thing, they might be able to go pull a trade for if things get rough up there. I mean, pick your choice. They both want money right now, and you take your poison.
yeah, yeah, I agree.
Hmm.
I love both of them, and they can
Hmm.
easily make their way down to LA to help out with Justin Herbert. But I do say I do want to say that if you haven't listened to Harbaugh's comments on seeing Justin Herbert back on the practice field again, it was something along the lines of it was like angels were singing, and that to me just tells you how much he's in love with Justin Herbert's arm. Which means I think that's why I'm setting us up for a pot shot offense because I do feel like that's how this is going to be. Or he's going to just throw everything we think of out the window and he's going to come out in a 5 wide set, first drive, and just try to throw it across the field. And then he's going to bunch it into an iPro. Like, this is 100% Harbaugh's situation.
Guaranteed his first pass of the season is a bomb. Harbaugh's,
Okay.
whether they run it 4 times first starts the first, but it's going to be like Aaron Rodgers when he threw that one to Christian Watson in Green Bay a couple years ago. First pass of the season, 45-yard bomb. That's going to be Herbert next year. Whether it's completed or not, we will see, and who it's to. But he's going to test that arm out real quick.
Yeah, exactly. And he can flick it with the best of them. We watched him in person, and arm
It's
talent
inhuman.
out the window.
It's inhuman.
It's crazy. Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and just skip straight to some real arm talent as well. And who's healthy and who threw a ball behind his back. That's the Kansas City Chiefs. 15-2. Yeah, I couldn't go through a whole episode without mentioning that just because I think it's hilarious that everybody's like, oh my gosh, he threw the ball behind him. How else were you going to get the ball to Travis Kelcey, who was just being lazy and standing there? Like, no offense, Travis. I don't actually hate you. I understand what you were doing. It was just your release just barely got off the block. It just held on a little longer. Patrick, I know why you did it because it is the most efficient way to get there. I strongly considered doing it in our flag football tournament, doing the same thing. I would not have been as cool though. No offense to our flag football team, but I don't think I would have completed it. And no, I think this is one of those things. Look, Patrick has learned to win. That was his last 2 years. He learned to finally win in the most effective manner possible. So what do? You give him a cheetah again. You got one. You did great with him. You had a lot of fun, but you threw a lot of picks. You took him away. You learned to throw the ball underneath and dink and dime people to death. Now we're going to give you a cheetah again, and you're going to use that knowledge where you're dinking and dumping the ball across the field and destroying everybody. And now we're just going to throw a guy who can literally run past anybody else in the entire NFL. Line anybody else up next to him, he's running past him. That's how fast this dude is. And now you're just going to give him Patrick Mahomes. All right. Good luck, NFL. Andy Reid is about to have way too much fun with this. And the only way they lose these 2 games in my eyes is Andy Reid tries to be too cute. He goes Philadelphia Eagles Andy Reid for 2 games and just tries to have too much fun. Or they're 15-0, clinch the division, clinch the number 1 seed in the AFC, and they're just goofing around. And they're putting the backups in after 1 series. Like, that's how this goes. This team is so good. It's scary. However, I do have one of the losses coming against the Raiders yet again. Because that just seems to be how things go lately. Is they're great, and then the Raiders beat them one time just out of nowhere. It's usually at Arrowhead, which is the wild part.
Even after they made fun of Patrick Mahomes and called him Kermit the Frog?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So you're saying the first game, Kansas City is going to blow them out 42-3, then the second game, the Raiders will somehow win it magically.
Yeah, because Antonio Pierce is the ultimate, like, hey, guys, you remember what they did to us? We called him Kermit. We're not going to talk about that, guys. Do you remember what they just did to us? Like, he's going to make it all about what they did to them, and they're going to come out like crazy. But it's going to take one game of getting beat down for it to happen. So yeah, that's where I have the AFC West. So just to recap, from the bottom to the top, we are going with the Broncos at 5-12, bringing up the bottom of this division. Just need a lot of figure out a lot of things. Raiders number 3, 9-8. Again, a couple holes, but they'll beat up on some people. The Chargers, I have a whole lot of faith in, and probably going to lose my pants on that one. 11-6 for the LA Chargers, and the Kansas City Chiefs 15-2 because they're just that freaking good, and it's so frustrating.
Yeah, that's a very fair way to round out Kansas City. And for our anonymous fan vote as well, so how things are different, and yet they are the same. At the bottom, the Broncos at 4-13, Raiders at 7-10-3, the Chargers at 9-8, and then the Kansas City Chiefs at 11-6, taking the division. So another division where we don't have a lot of parity as far as where they finish. We just have a question of how they're going to get there. But we will have to see too. Like, we will have that playoff episode coming up soon. Maybe those Chargers 11 wins gets them in the playoffs. So we'll have to wait and see for that. But that's what going to do it here for the West. That all we has left is Kelcey's favorite and least favorite division in the NFL. We have the Easts coming up next, and
it's sure not the NFC East is my favorite. That's for sure. It's definitely not that one.
will they be the beast or will they be the least? So that we're going to find out for sure. Then after that, we have the playoffs and awards. So definitely be sure to tune in for that. And be sure to tune in for Fantasy Fridays coming back as well, too. So we'll be talking everything you need to know about fantasy football starting again on this Friday, where I'll be talking with us about some of my favorite ADP players in each round. Players that, based on their average draft position, you can get them at a very high quality price. So definitely keep an eye out for that. We'll go over a few of those and plenty more throughout the season. But once again, we do appreciate y'all for joining us, hanging out with us. If you haven't checked out the other division previews, go ahead and check those out as well, too. Let us know what we got right, wrong, and different, and everything in between. But we'll see you all again next time.